Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Today, after a controversial criminal trial here in the UK against Sikh Youth UK, we peel back the covers and take a look in detail at just what's going on behind the scenes, behind the British state and the UK Sikh community. And it turns out to be worse than we thought. Politicians' links to India once again in the spotlight after new revelations in the latest foreign interference inquiry in Canada. And yet another sexual assault case in India. This time it's the police up to no good. And the Khalistan Referendum turns its focus to New Zealand, but more on that in a moment. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our amazing viewers out there. Thanks for tuning in yet again. We look forward to you spreading the word and bringing in your friends, family, and everybody else because we want to see our viewers grow. And thank you for being a part of it with us.
Indeed, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as always, we'll be taking a look at lots of your great comments at the end of the show, which have been filling up below our videos, so thanks so much for all of those. Right, James, let's get the show on the road. What are you going to start us off with today?
Well, Angus, the beauty of inquiries and investigations just continue here in Canada. Of course, now we've not only heard about the confirmed involvement of the Chinese when it comes to Canadian politics, but now who's in bed with who? It looks like there's more information and evidence coming in about Indian interference in the Conservative Party race that happened in 2022. But with the recent inquiry, that is just coming to light. So it's a question of who's betting who and what's going on with the world of foreign interference. So let's take a look, though. There was actually a very interesting article that came out, and you've already seen this, Angus. So I'm going to share it and go through it with the viewers, though, here, because it is very interesting to see how far the investigation has gotten thus far, as there was a short several-month break. But at this point, I'm going to go through the report and read what it is. It's a little longer, but I think that it's an important part to give the perspective of what's going on. So it starts out here with the testimony before the Foreign Interference Commission. The National Director of the Conservative Party of Canada, Mike Crace, has said that he does not recall receiving any information about Indian interference in 2022 Conservative leadership race. But he also stated that he did not ask the party's designated representative to receive classified intelligence about whether or not he received any information on this issue. And this even after the allegations were published in June of 2024. On a side note there is that people are very curious why the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, right now, has refused thus far to get security clearance to read top secret and top level dossiers on national security and other issues that, of course, he, as the leader of the opposition, should be going over and reviewing. And again, if he plans on being prime minister, how does he intend to do that without being vetted in terms of that security? So back onto the story, though. When asked whether the CPC carried out any internal investigations or discussions regarding the allegations, given the gravity and the nature of the very public allegations, he simply stated, "We're confident in our process and the hundreds and thousands of people who voted to elect our leader." Now, again, if there's interference going on there, those numbers are really irrelevant when it comes to whether or not they were aware of the interference and the meddling in the leadership race. So the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, also known as the NSICOP, or NICECOP, and that is something that you'll probably hear a fair amount about now that the inquiry is back in session. Paragraph 73 of the report was redacted and replaced simply by the following description, citing a 2022 CSIS document, which is the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. The paragraph was deleted to remove injurious and privileged information. The paragraph described India's alleged interference in a Conservative Party of Canada leadership race. So it's very clear what was redacted and what was removed from that statement or that paragraph. which is very concerning, of course. In a December of 2023 story, Sam Cooper reported that in October 2022, CSIS intelligence assessment suggested that India interfered in the Conservative Party's leadership race in 2022. Of course, now that looks to have more confirmation. CSIS intelligence indicated that the government of India has engaged in foreign interference activities related to the leadership race for a political party in Canada. So again, we know where that's going and where that has since been traced to, and it seems to be continuing on. The document stated that the Indian consulate in Canada informed a different leadership candidate who was running for the leadership of the same political party that he cannot attend India community events or events hosted by the consulate. So again, very suspect in terms of how they are pressuring the diaspora to vote and what impact that may have had on that Conservative Party leadership race. It goes on. This example of election interference highlights the degree of influence some foreign states have over other diaspora communities, acting as gatekeepers between elected officials and community organizations. I think that's a very important paragraph. I think it really speaks volumes as to where this investigation is going and the level of interference in which they are finding. Earlier today, Prabhat Singh brought the Commission's attention to an October 31st, 2022 CSIS intelligence assessment, which closely resembles the language reported by Sam Cooper in a section that is heavily redacted, stating, "The government of India has engaged in foreign interference activities related to the leadership race for a political party in Canada." It does not question, it does not leave that as an open-ended statement. It is very clear and very concise. The section ends with, "This example serves to highlight the degree of influence some foreign states have over diaspora communities." And then it's redacted from there. So again, a very scathing information report that's coming out from CSIS. There's also, as I said, there's also confirmed reports of interference potentially by the government of China and other international communities. So this is very, very important when we look at, of course, the assassination of Mr. Najjar here in Canada, as well as their influence and attempted assassination attempts and questionable involvement in other deaths around the world of those who have been speaking out to not only in the movement towards Khalistan, but just against the Modi government or the BJP in general. So it really, Angus, is very interesting as to where they are getting with this inquiry and how much information is coming out at this point and how much more has to come. And it's going to be interesting when the redactions are removed after the final report is issued. Again, it's going to be really important to see what gets cleared and what doesn't, what they hold back from us as a Canadian public, but also the international community.
Yeah, I think this is shocking but not surprising. That first inquiry, as you reported on, James, revealed some pretty damning evidence about India's activities, not just in Canada, but obviously around the world. But clearly they have this multilateral agenda to interfere with Western politics on every level. And it's very interesting that a lot of this has been redacted. And of course, redacting things from reports like this usually are justified through national interest means or intelligence that should not be revealed into the public domain, again, for national interest reasons. But it does imply that something's going on and they are clearly hiding something and they're trying to bury something. And it looks very clearly like the Conservative Party in Canada has been up to no good, which is ironic, bearing in mind that similar accusations have been levelled at the Conservative Party here in the UK, and I'll talk about that shortly. But I think the redactions speak volumes. I think that blank silence, I think, actually shouts out very loudly that there is something very important being hidden here. And we do know, and it's not very hard to predict, that India has been clearly interfering and trying to ensure that RSS approved candidates have been pushed forward, have been prioritised, should we say, in their agenda to interfere. over the Atlantic into Canadian politics and indeed in the United States. And they have done this across the Western world, where they have very almost overtly been pushing their preferred candidates who will be more sympathetic to not just India, but the RSS version of India. Of course, any candidates that stand up for human rights, any candidates that start peeling back the layers of India and discovering these human rights abuses, the abuse of the minorities, and particularly the diaspora, Sikh communities who've been raising these issues. Anybody who shows any sympathy towards the Sikh communities in both Canada, the US and the UK, well, of course, they are the candidates that start being sidelined, marginalised by Indian interference. They are ensuring that the Indian diaspora then marginalise these candidates. But of course, these candidates want their support. Any candidate for any political party wants support from every community. But it's very easy to start influencing that process. Well, we'll say, our Indian diaspora will not support this candidate because he has sympathies for the Sikh community, etc., etc. It's a dirty game, James. It's a very dirty game. Clearly, Canadian Conservatives have got their hands dirty on this. They're trying to, I would say, very clearly hide and bury what's going on. One wonders why it has been redacted. It also begs the question, will indeed this inquiry reveal what has been redacted? We will see. Time will tell, but I'm sure, James, you'll be following this very closely.
Absolutely. And depending on where things head with Canadian politics, with the breakup of the NDP and the Liberal Party in terms of their partnership, we'll have to wait and see if it's even going to be the same government in control come the release of the report. And the reason why this is of particular importance is because at this time, the polls are showing that the Conservative Party actually holds a very strong lead over the NDP or the Liberal Party. So if it turns out that the Conservatives are brought in as a majority party in Canada in the next election, this report may never see the light of day if that's the case. So it's going to be a very interesting one to watch. And as I stated throughout the story, the fact that the leader of the opposition has not even been read in on a lot of the high security or top level security dossiers and reports because he refuses still to get that clearance. And that's a very big question as to why he would not do that. It's just insane that he has not done this. It's probably one of the first times the opposition in the history of Canada has never been cleared and vetted for security. So
yeah,
very interesting,
suspicious.
Angus, very interesting.
Yeah, I do find it deeply suspicious because even human nature, human natural curiosity, as a leader of the opposition, you'd want to see all the state secrets at the first opportunity. So it really does sit very anomalously. Why? There must be a very good reason, and will we find out? Well, if we do, James, I'm sure you'll be the first to report it.
I'm sure we will. I'll be right in there like a dirty shirt trying to get the information. But let's move on to some more, I would say politics, but it is in a certain level, and that is the excitement building for November. In November, of course, the 17th, we'll see the referendum for Khalistan moving to New Zealand. The New Zealand event is creating a big stir and a lot of excitement, while just the normal everyday New Zealanders probably really don't know what it's all about. So it's nice to see that there's so much excitement going into it now because it allows a lot of the regular population outside of the Sikh diaspora to understand what Khalistan is, why it is so important, and the impact that the loss of the Sikh Empire had not only on that region, but I would go as far as to say the world. We know that the Sikh community has been instrumental in fighting, shoulder to shoulder with the British, with the Canadians. They are just outstanding warriors and soldiers when it comes to any military operations to stand up for those who are weakened, whether it by government policies, whether it by war, whether it by poverty. The Sikh community has always stood proud and stood tall to lend a hand to those who need to be brought back up onto their feet. And this is a great opportunity once again for the international world outside of New Zealand as well to understand why the Khalistan referendum is so important. It is a non-binding referendum that is acknowledging that the Sikh diaspora should have the opportunity to create their homeland, decide their own future, and to be able to rule their own culture, their own history, their own destiny. And that is why it is so important that all Sikhs get out and have their voices heard. Whether or not you vote yes or no for the Khalistan referendum, more importantly, is to speak and to have your voice heard on the subject, exercising that democracy, that right to vote is even more important than the vote itself. So that, again, as I said, Angus, it is exciting to see that another stop in the world tour, as we can call it, for the referendum, and it's getting exciting. We'll bring you stories on different events that are leading up to it, and hopefully we'll be able to speak with a few people from New Zealand and just briefly have them on the show between now and then. So if there's any of our fans and viewers out there over in New Zealand, we'd love to hear from you. And if you would like to speak on video with us, we would love to have you, just to hear what kind of buzz is in the air over in New Zealand. I know that from my community here in Metro Vancouver, there was so much electricity in the air, so much energy when it was leading up to the Khalistan referendum, that they actually had to add a second referendum day because so many people, over 100,000 people, showed up to vote, and not everybody was able to get that vote placed before the end of the day, so they had to add the second day. I also attended recently, as our viewers know, in Calgary to the referendum, and the excitement, not only in the Sikh community, as I said, but the whole community. People really love to see democracy at work. So again, for all of our viewers in New Zealand, we hope that you get out and have your voice heard, but also reach out to us. We'd love to hear about it. We'd love to hear how the rest of the community's learning about this important international issue.
Fantastic. Yeah, we look forward to hearing how that event goes. And I do know we've got obviously viewers in Australia. Do we have viewers in New Zealand? I can't actually recall seeing in the comments. Maybe there was one. But anyway, if you are in New Zealand, give us a comment. Let us know that you are there. And better still, if you do attend, and of course we do hope that every Sikh person in New Zealand attends the event, casts their vote in this referendum, because this is so important. Take a selfie video, even just a wave. You don't even have to say anything, but just take a selfie video, show us, send us some real footage of the day, send it through to our email address that we'll give at the end, and you would be more than delighted to report on that and to share it as well. So yeah, please do that if you feel that you're capable of doing that. But yes, I had a very interesting podcast that was uploaded last night onto the channel with Dr. Bakshish Singh Sandhu. We talked about the referendum. Dr. Sandhu is a co-founder of Sikhs for Justice, of course the organisation behind this very referendum itself. And we had a very interesting discussion over half an hour or so, talking about the roots of Sikh nationalism. We talked about the court case against Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, and of course the whole Khalistan issue. And it is definitely worth a watch, because Dr. Sandhu is, of course, unsurprisingly, very passionate about this very subject, and does give a very interesting background and context as to the whole nationalism story, the whole story behind why nationalism is so important for the Sikh community and where it comes from. So do keep an eye out for that. But yes, to our viewers in New Zealand, we would be delighted to hear from you, and get out there, cast your vote whichever way you feel about this very important topic, Jane. So yeah, this looks like an interesting day to report on.
Absolutely. And we're a small budget show, but if there's somebody out there that owns a travel agency that wants to bring us over to report live, we'd love to have that too.
I think it takes about 5 days to get there. So unfortunately, Perspectives might be off air for about 2 weeks just to get there and back. So... But anyway,
okay. We've got nothing but time, Angus.
Indeed. So let's move on to very serious matters now. And my first story, and one of our viewers did comment recently, in recent days, about a story that's been bubbling away here in the UK for quite some time about Sikh Youth UK. And we've had a very, where to even begin with this story? We have an English phrase, to open a can of worms, which basically means you peel back the layers and you find an absolute horror story beneath. And this is very much the case of this story. It is very much linked into the story of Jagtar Singh Johal, who, of course, we talk about on a regular basis. And I'm very actually pleased to say that on Monday next week, I will be interviewing Jagtar Singh Johal's brother, Gurpreet, who's been campaigning vigorously and very actively over this absolutely appalling, outrageous story of Jaggy being arbitrarily detained in India for his activities and highlighting India's misbehaviour, to put it mildly. And so Jaggy's story is very much linked to actually what's been going on here in the UK and linked to the Sikh Youth Federation here in the UK. So there's been a story, and it's very timely actually, there's been a story just released on Baz News, and it's written by Shamsha Singh, who's based in Southall here in the UK. He is actually a co-founder of the National Sikh Youth Federation. And he is himself quite an influential Sikh activist, and his work, of course, centres around the Sikh community and Khalistan. Now, various Sikh organisations and a number of Gurdwara committees of England have issued very public statements supporting this organisation, the Sikh Youth UK, and its founder, Deepa Singh. And these two organisations, this organisation and particularly Deepa Singh, have faced a heck of a lot of issues with the British state. West Midlands Police, particularly their counter-terrorism unit, the CTU as it's known. And the CTU of West Midlands Police have had quite a vendetta against Sikh Youth UK, and particularly around this whole charitable funds issue. And so in response to this, Shamsha Singh has written a very long and very detailed article about what's actually been going on. And unfortunately, we don't have time to go through it in detail, but I have cherry-picked, as I tend to do, some of the key points raised by Shamsha in this article. And I talk about a can of worms, and wow, I mean, where to even begin with this? So unfortunately, under the restrictions of time, I can only pick out a few of these and just point to several issues that he's raised in this article. And I'll just quickly flick through this and highlight some of the quite astounding revelations that he comes out with, things that I even after in my own research I wasn't even aware of. And he says that the UK has a long history of targeting Sikh activists, which has intensified in the last few years as the government employs creative state-sanctioned methods of surveillance and criminalisation. And most recently, SYUK was placed on trial as a result of this CTU, arguing that the organisation was misleading the Charities Commission. However, Sikh Youth UK was not a registered charity, yet it is being treated, audited and criminalised as one. So even the very premise of what the CTU have been up to is actually flawed from the very beginning. And it stands as a warning. What's been going on is a warning to all grassroots community, religious and other pantheistic organisations about the mechanisms and strategies being deployed against Sikh activists. And again, we've talked regularly about the British state and why on earth it has been so almost obsessed to target the Sikh community here in the UK, and particularly the Khalistan activist community. Why is this friction? Why are they so obsessed with criminalising particularly the Khalistan activists here in the UK? And I have actually raised this very question and I've really struggled to answer the questions, but the evidence is there and it's out there, and this article points to very much it. And Shamsha goes back to a lot of the history, and he says we must contextualise what's been going on with the 8 years of collusion and intelligence exchange between the Indian and UK governments. And he then immediately refers to the Jaggi case and the failed extradition of what he calls the West Midlands Three. Now, this West Midlands 3 comes back to a time back in between 2016 and October 2017. There was a series of assassinations of high-ranking right-wing Hindutva figures in the Punjab, and 9 individuals were assassinated, and this kicked off quite an important sequence of events. Now, as a result of these assassinations, India would claim that there was an international conspiracy to revive Sikh militancy in the Punjab. India alleged that resources, support and coordination for these assassinations came from here in the UK. Now, Subsequent to that, in November 2017, as we've reported, Jagtar Singh Johal was arrested and he was charged with multiple cases relating to what the Indian media would come to refer as a wave of targeted killings in Punjab. So they've linked Jaggi to these killings. As it turns out, he actually wasn't even in the Punjab at the time. Jagtar's charges were twofold. Firstly, radicalising Sikhs, and secondly, conspiracy to commit assassinations. The Indian security establishment needed to show strength following this sequence of audacious assassinations of leading Hindu figures. It was, of course, very embarrassing for India that this had happened. India made more arrests and would pin the assassinations on the Khalistan Liberation Force, the KLF. India used the target killings to push their domestic security rhetoric of Khalistani terrorism. Here we go, it suddenly rebounds in the form of this label of Khalistani terrorists. And they evolved this labelling of Khalistani terrorists into their own foreign policy initiatives that could then be used to target Sikh activists within India's borders and beyond, hence the transnational repression. India regarded all Sikhs subsequently and all Sikh activism and support for Khalistan, peaceful or not, as terrorism. In 2018, the homes of 5 Sikh activists were raided by West Midlands Police, the CTU, acting on information from India. The 2018 raids were directly linked to the ongoing arbitrary detention of Jaggi, as all 5 Singhs were actively involved in the Free Jaggi Now campaign. In September, West Midlands Police publicly tweeted that the raids were to investigate, quote, allegations of extremist activity in India and fraud offences, which they would claim was linked to money laundering to support terrorism in Punjab. Following the raids, surprise, surprise, the Hindustan Times published 1. The Indian establishment was upbeat over anti-terror raids. 2. The raids were an outcome of diplomatic pressure created by the Indian agencies on Britain about the involvement of those living in the country in anti-India terror activities. And thirdly, the National Investigation Agency, NIA, and the Punjab Police have decided to make a fresh bid seeking extradition. The Hindustan Times article went on to name all 5 Singhs. However, only 2 Singhs, Deepa Singh of Sikh Youth UK and Shamshir himself, were made public. So clearly, the Hindustan Times had got the names of all 5 Singhs. Where could they possibly have gotten their names from? The names may have been released by the West Midlands Police themselves. They weren't released in the public. It can only have come through collusion by West Midlands Police and Indian authorities or Indian intelligence agencies. The UK Police's role in surveilling and targeting Sikh activists, Naujawan organised to ban police presence and recruitment in Sikh spaces and Gurdwara, which was endorsed by UK major Sikh organisations. This position would be vindicated in August 2022 when Reprieve would point to the role of MI5 in the arrest of Jagtar Singh. This is an explosive paragraph. Firstly, as a result of the earlier raids and the collusion, the known collusion between India and the British state and West Midlands Police, that the backlash to that was that Sikh organisations said, no, okay, we're going to take a step back from any collaboration with West Midlands Police, with the British state. The Gurdwara will likewise say, no, I'm sorry, we're not entertaining people like this if you are going to collude with our known enemies of India. And the revelation here, which I did not know, was that it turns out, and I'll cover this in my interview with Jaggi's brother Gurpreet on Monday, MI5 and MI6, it turns out, sent intelligence to India that then subsequently led to the arrest and the arbitrary detention of Jagtar. Let that sink in. Our own intelligence services here in the UK passed intelligence on to India that allowed the detention of Jaggi, who has since been tortured. Now, the British government, the British state, has a very clear policy when it comes to torture, arbitrary detention. It will not entertain, it will not support in any way, shape or form any anti-democratic issues like this. Very publicly, there's no ambiguity about it. And yet we find British intelligence passed intelligence information to the Indian state, knowing full well what it would lead to. It would lead to the detention and torture of a British citizen. That is explosive in itself. Now, at the centre of all this was the organising capacity of Sikh Youth UK. Following the raids in 2018, the UK government arrested and tried to extradite 3 Singhs from the West Midlands in December 2020. This is ultimately the West Midlands 3, as we're referred to. Ultimately, the extradition was unsuccessful. The same discredited evidence in India, which resulted in these acquittals, was used, and the UK government was willing to arrest and extradite 3 Singhs based solely on Indian intelligence in a legal case without basis that would eventually be dropped. Here we have more evidence of collusion between Indian intelligence and the British state. Is that India, and we've had this in Canada, James, and of course in the UK, is where India is passing intelligence, the NIA and RAW are passing intelligence and colluding with the British state, saying here's some intelligence about some Khalistani activists, terrorists as they describe them. They're obliging the British state through basically very weak intelligence to go and arrest, harass, intimidate and detain Khalistani activists here in the UK based on Indian intelligence, even though it turns out to be false. And the courts end up releasing these people. So the collusion of the UK establishment and the Indian state is well documented and it is long-standing. Furtherance of a counter-terrorism agenda, it is designed to disrupt and discredit Sikh activism here in the UK. During the late 80s, a peak of Sikh militancy in the Punjab, a team from the West Midlands Police visited the Punjab to exchange information with security forces about Sikh, what they call terrorists, and their supporters. Yes, the late 1980s, after 1984, when we do know, it has been leaked that the British government was involved in Indira Gandhi's assault on the Golden Temple, is that we do know that British military forces were consulted, particularly the SAS, were consulted about the attack on the Harmandir Sahib. We do know that the British Foreign Secretary at that time had discussions with Indira Gandhi and his counterpart in India about that very assault. We do know that there was a lot of goings on. Dibinderjit Singh himself, a former guest, and will be a guest, I'm sure, in the near future to talk about similar things. We do know that there was collusion in 1984 about the Harmandir Sahib attack. We do know now that later in the 80s there was further collusion between the British state and the Indian state to try and suppress what they call Sikh militancy. In fact, it was just the Sikhs fighting back against essentially a genocide. So I talk about a can of worms, James. Where to begin with this? Again, I've only touched the surface of what's been going on here. Shamsh's article is explosive in many ways. To the Sikh community, there's probably no revelations here. To those not in the Sikh community, it absolutely lifts the lid on a dreadful collusion and collaboration between the British state and the Indian state against a community that are not terrorists. They are simply activists. They are political dissenters. They are political activists. They are fighting for the right to self-determination. There is no militancy there. There is no terrorism there. It is political activism. And yet, why is the British government, formerly the Conservative government, and now the British Labour government, why are they still colluding and collaborating with the Indian state? It is a very big question. Why has Keir Starmer betrayed this promise given to the Sikh community to open an inquiry into 1984? I hear a deafening silence about that, Mr. Starmer. Why are you not opening this inquiry that you have promised you would push forward? That's a very big question, James. It's this, as I say, this is a can of worms, and wow, we don't have enough hours in the day to talk about this one.
Oh, absolutely, and it's worth noting as well that several British parliamentarians and other spokespeople have denied any knowledge of torture of Jaggi, and it's just out and out clear that that's contrary to the reality of what's going on. And for them to claim they didn't know ahead of time that this was a risk, I mean, that's just a pile of bullshit as well. So.
Yeah, as I say, do watch my interview with Gurpreet on Monday, because, of course, we will be getting it straight from the horse's mouth, what's been going on. Gurpreet has, of course, unsurprisingly, been heavily involved from a political aspect into what's going on behind the scenes with his brother. He's been campaigning for 7 years to free Jaggi, along with a very powerful group of supporters. So it will be very interesting to hear his revelations Of course, he's going to be restricted to some degree. He has to keep his language quite diplomatic. We don't, as of course many others of the community don't. Yes. We don't need to be diplomatic. We can be quite passionate and quite vocal about this because I think the anger beneath the surface is enormous, as it is justifiably so. So, anyway, let us move on to the next story because we'll talk about this further on Monday. Right, my next story is, it's yet another one. It's yet another moment of shame for India. We have regularly talked about sexual assaults going on in India and this endemic problem of sexual assault against women, and women being treated as second-class citizens and maybe even third-class citizens in India. We have talked about this problem, which is just so prevalent throughout Indian society. Well, it's not just prevalent. We've seen it in the medical profession. We've seen it out in the streets. Would you believe it? Even the police force are involved now. A story reported by the BBC over the last few days. Again, shocks us to the core. A retired Indian High Court judge will now investigate allegations that a woman was physically and sexually assaulted by a group of police inside a police station in the eastern state of Odisha. After the allegations levelled last week by the 32-year-old woman and her fiancé, an army officer, it led to a huge outcry. 4 police officials, including three women, were suspended. A 5th policeman was transferred. A video of the woman, a law graduate who runs a restaurant in the state capital, Bhubaneswar, detailing her alleged abuse by police early on the morning of the 15th of September has been shared many times on social media. The footage makes for a difficult watch. In a wheelchair, with a collar around her neck and one arm in a sling, the woman repeatedly breaks down while narrating to journalists what she says happened to her. She said she had gone to Bharatpur police station with her fiancé after closing her restaurant at around 1 a.m. because they'd been harassed by a group of men on the road. They asked police to send a patrol car quickly to intercept the men, who couldn't have gone far. The police refused to take down our complaint. Instead, they abused us. When I told them that I was a law graduate and knew my rights, they got even more angry. When I objected, 2 female officials started pulling my hair and beating me. I kept pleading with them to stop, but they dragged me through the corridor and one of them tried to strangle me. When I fought back, they tied my hands and legs and locked me up in a room, she said, sobbing. One male officer came in, took off my bra and started kicking me in my breasts. At around 6 a.m, so this is 6 hours later, the officer in charge of the police station came into the room. He pulled down my pants, he lowered them, threatened to rape me multiple times unless I stopped screaming for help. Reports say that the police said that the army officer and his fiancée had arrived at the station drunk and the woman had been aggressive. They alleged that she had slapped a policewoman and bitten another officer. She was then arrested and a magistrate placed her in custody. So that's the police's version of events. But 3 days after the alleged assault, the High Court freed the woman on bail and criticised the police and the lower court that jailed her. The judge said, on careful examination of the record, it appears that the allegations are very serious in nature. They are anathema to the very concept of a democratic and orderly society. That was Justice Aditya Kumar Mohapatra, adding that the police had failed to follow the procedure laid down in law while arresting her. Many in India have taken to social media to express their anger at alleged police brutality. A large number of former and serving army officials have shared the viral video of the woman and pledged support to her fight, since her father, this is the girl's father, is also a retired army brigadier. The Indian Army has also written a letter to the Chief Justice of the High Court in Odisha saying that a serving officer had been kept in custody for nearly 14 hours without charge. The modesty and dignity of his fiancée, who also happens to be the daughter of a retired brigadier, was grossly outraged by the police authorities. Now, it also says in other reports that the CCTV, this is a new police station apparently, and it was built as a so-called model police station in the area. But it turns out the CCTV wasn't working. Oh, raised eyebrows. Well, James, I shake my head and I sigh in just disbelief. This is the police. The police who everyone turns to looking for help. And there's a bit more to the story, so I'll just go back to the story again. On social media, some have commented on the women's clothing, while others have questioned the character of a woman who argues with men and drinks alcohol. So social media is brutal, but this is people, and this will be people on the right wing, no doubt. They're actually turning on the victim. They're victim blaming. They're saying, look at her clothes. You know, she asked for this. Oh, I mean, here in the West, that argument has been thrown out quite ruthlessly. The character of a woman who argues with men and drinks alcohol. So they are victim blaming. This woman, apparently, according to them, is responsible for this sexual assault. How come there were no CCTVs when the Indian Supreme Court mandates it for every police station, someone asked. And the case has received a lot of attention because the woman is from a privileged background, but no one knows what goes on in other police stations when ordinary women go to seek help. We tell our daughters that if you're in trouble, go to the nearest police station. We tell them it's the second safest place after their home. What do we tell them now? Where will a woman go now? Yes, James, the police. We're supposed to be able to trust them. We turn to them for help when we are in trouble, when we feel vulnerable. And yet, here in India, the police turn out to sexually assault women, victims. They are themselves assaulting women. We've often talked about the torture cells in police stations. Yeah, that's a dirty little secret of India. But now the police themselves, it turns out, are often responsible for potentially raping women who come in looking for help. Where do we go from here, James?
Yeah. And I would go as far as to say that, I mean, the torture cells are, levels above what these individuals went through. I mean, when women are vulnerable, when they are victimized, and to go to seek help from those who are supposed to be there. People hold police officers, or used to anyway, they held them on a pedestal. They were the ones that they looked up to in times of trouble. And that's why police are seen overall in the world as heroes. But when you have individuals that are traumatizing and terrorizing women within the police station, I mean, that is just the lowest of low. And I hope that this doesn't just fade off into the abyss here. I want to see a lot more in terms of the investigation and holding these officers accountable. It's just unthinkable what they did.
Yeah, I have no words, and I've ranted about this very topic on so many occasions on the show. I think we'll just leave it there, James, and our audience, I think, will understand. Yeah, everybody's feelings about this whole story. It is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on now to our comments section, and lots of great comments. Thank you for your comments. Do keep them coming, and lots of big talking points this week. KP Singh, I want to just quickly highlight this one. KP Singh asked a couple of days ago. This was aimed at our colleague on the Punjabi side of the channel, Surinder. Why were the comments turned off in the other show that you did today morning? I've asked Surinder this very same question, and Surinder said, apparently, because we are a growing channel, we are attracting a lot of attention from Hindutva, from the IT cells. They are turning their attention on us, as indeed, of course, we're noticing here on the English channel side. And Surinder said that there's a lot of mischief going on, not just comments disappearing, but there's a lot of Hindutva activists now pouring their dirt, let's call it, into the comments section, causing trouble and deliberately trying to change the agenda and the narrative in our comment section. So it was turned off very deliberately as a tactic to try and slow down these IT cells coming from the Hindutva side. We've got to keep an eye out for this, James. It's very dangerous, it's very insidious, it's very undemocratic what they're up to. But in answer to KP saying that is why, unfortunately, we had to do this. We will, of course, always resist this. It is very important that our comment sections remain open. It is very important that our comment sections remain open to even our critics, that they can intelligently and politely argue and criticise or disagree with us, and we do always encourage that. But when it comes to the IT cells, we have to draw a line somewhere. They are, quite nasty, and unfortunately we do have to draw a line somewhere, and on Surinder's channel, unfortunately, occasionally it has to be done.
Yeah, and it's just too bad that we do that. But again, the importance of the interaction with our community, with our fans, with our viewers. I mean, you're a big part of our shows and why we do this. So it's not done lightly by any means.
Yeah, it's so essential for not just the show, but just for the community, just to have this dialogue all the time, public dialogue, because it keeps these issues alive. So, yeah, we will, of course, resist it as much as we can. Right, this was a great comment in Punjabi from Ghost Rider. Now, again, unfortunately, James and I, our Punjabi is pretty basic, to put it mildly. So we had to resort to Google Translate for this. But I did put this one up because it's a very powerful comment. And please, members of our audience who are bilingual, correct me or correct Google Translate wherever this has gone wrong. But I translated this as, James, this is for our benefit. The Khalsa will rule and remain. No one will perish. All will find shelter, whatever happened. Say, Nihal Sat Sri Akal, Waheguru Ji, Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji, Ki Fateh Khalsa, Long Live Khalsa, and so on. Now, this refers to, I say this is a very powerful comment because, of course, this does refer back to the Khalsa. It does, of course, refer back to, inherently, the Sikh Empire and the benefits of the Sikh Empire and the foundational, fundamental philosophies of the Sikh Empire. All will find shelter. No one will perish. This is all about that the Sikh Empire and ultimately Khalistan, when it arrives, it will be equal to all. It will be welcome to all. It will follow the foundations and the philosophies of Sikhi, which means there is no discrimination. Long live Khalsa. Now, there is one phrase in there, Sat Sri Akal. I had to look this up. I thought, what does it mean? Well, we often say, James, that many of our comments are educational. This is very educational for us as non-Sikhs. And I'll tell you, and I learned this when I researched this, so thank you, Ghost Rider, for this comment and this educational comment. Sat Sri Akal is often used as a greeting by Sikhs. It is the second half of the Sikh clarion call, Bole So Nihal Sat Sri Akal, which was given by the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh. Non-Sikhs can also greet Sikhs with Sat Sri Akal by bringing their palms together at chest level and slightly bowing their head. Sat Sri Akal. So, thank you, Ghost Rider. I have just learned, James and I have just learned something very new. We've learned some new etiquette, and thank you very much indeed for that. No doubt our audience will correct me if I've got that horribly wrong, or I've done it wrong, or I've pronounced it wrong. But hopefully, James and I, we have learned something new, have we not, James?
Absolutely, and it wouldn't be the first time we were wrong, but we like to hear when we are so that we can correct ourselves and learn more along the road.
Indeed. So hopefully we've clumsily worked our way through Sat Sri Akal. And of course, very timely, Manjit, who very often just puts very simple greetings, has in fact followed this comment with Sat Sri Akal. So I would say to Manjit, Sat Sri Akal. Hopefully I've got that right, James.
Absolutely.
Right, let's get back to more serious matters now. Hat B, yes, it was you, Hat B, of course, your comment that I referred to earlier on the show. Can you please explain what's going on in the UK and Sikh youth? Hopefully that has answered your question, and I'm not going to rant again because once you set me off on that, I tend not to stop. So I won't rant again about that. Hopefully I have ranted enough about that in the earlier story. But the second half of your comment is, why is the RSS influence in the UK so high? That is a very good question. I do not know. And I think my only guess can be, I think it dates back to the British Empire days. I think it dates back to partition. And of course, the British Empire, and when we left India in 1947 and partition happened, of course, there were a lot of behind-the-scenes discussions and negotiations with, of course, the Brahmins, who in turn are represented by the RSS in many forms in India at the time and, of course, India today. I believe that connection between the Brahmins, the ruling elite of India now, finding form in the RSS, and the British state, I think that connection is still very strong. I think the ruling elite in the UK, those people behind who hide in the shadows of the British state, and those likewise their counterparts in India, I think they are still very close. I think there is a lot of collaboration still going on. We talked often, we mentioned Priti Patel herself from Indian heritage. The question is, why does she apparently have these strong RSS connections, again, I think is because she has been nurtured like many RSS acolytes are around the diaspora, both in Canada, the US, here in the UK, Australia, etc. They are raised and nurtured by RSS, likewise, acolytes, to be sympathetic to the RSS. I think that is why. Likewise, James talking about influence in Canada of the RSS. I think this network, and again, many of our podcasts bring this up, I think there is a very powerful RSS network that has infiltrated the West. It is very powerful. It is very successful. It is clearly very well financed. We talk about a $400 million annual budget of the RSS to spread their agenda. I think that answers it, James. We see it all around the Western world, don't we?
Absolutely. And I mean, as we've touched on the bots and, the sweat rooms where they just have people going at it on keyboards and trying to manipulate information, not only in Canada, the UK, but also in the US, Australia, everywhere. And I think that that's where we are seeing a transition at this point with the inquiry in Canada and the public outcry for investigations in the UK. We're really starting to see the power that and the influence that the RSS and other foreign agencies are having within communities. So, yeah, I think that it's definitely a high impact because of their budget and their abilities. But I also have confidence and hope that this will be less and less powerful as more and more people actually start to realize the level of manipulation that they're using.
And I think I often refer to and I question, why is Britain, the UK, so far behind the US and Canada in terms of its condemnation of India and its human rights abuses? Why is the UK, for example, so silent on much of this? Why is it silent on Jaggi? Why does it always seem to side with India against the Sikh community? And that stands in direct contrast to particularly Canada and, of course, the US to a large degree as well, who are much more vocal, much more willing to condemn India and its human rights abuses. And again, I think it all comes back to this. I think the UK is anchored by this historic tie to the RSS and the Brahmins, whereas the US and Canada are not. They don't have that historic connection. And I think it's encouraging, ironically, that the weakening of the UK in terms of, I would say, a centuries-long context. Of course, the British Empire has declined. UK's influence has declined over decades. But in turn, the US has risen. Canada, of course, is rising. And I think the more powerful that the US becomes, it is, of course, a superpower. And I think that stands actually for the benefit of the Sikh community, because the UK's strong ties with India are becoming less and less relevant. The UK, as we know, we often mock the UK. Even we in the UK mock ourselves as being a lapdog to the US. When the US says jump, quite often the UK government jumps. And that actually in turn could benefit the Sikh community, because the British obsession, the British state obsession to ally with India against the Sikhs is becoming less and less powerful. So it's an interesting, complex set of dynamics going on there. But I think we better move on, James, because we're running out of time on that one. KP Singh, of course, in the next comment does refer to this. Big respect to the two ladies, the two cores, who helped drag Tytler to court. So, a fabulous acknowledgement there. They deserve a huge amount of praise for the years of efforts they went to. Everyone knows what the result's going to be. And again, we come back to the RSS. The whole system is taken over by the RSS. Yeah, it's likely that Tytler will either get off or he'll get a cushy sentence. And we do know that when they end up, if any of these people do end up in prison, there's a video doing the rounds of one of these MPs in prison receiving a massage and receiving all sorts of luxuries in prison. So yeah, unfortunately, it's a two-tier justice system, and again run by the RSS. However, the final comment here, Sikhi never loses hope and keeps fighting. That is more like it. That is the fighting spirit. That is why Khalistan will happen, James, because Sikhi never loses hope. It will forever keep fighting. And this is a lesson that Narendra Modi and the RSS need to wake up and learn. You will never beat the Sikh community. It will always be there, no matter what you do. You may as well just accept it and let Khalistan happen. Get rid of the problem once and for all. Let Khalistan happen and it will not be a problem for you ever again, James. It's simple logic.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's put Khalistan aside for a moment and let's just look at India as a whole. I mean, the benefit that the Sikh community can have if Modi would only open his eyes and realize it. I mean, what they could do for the entire nation if they stopped going, if the Modi government, BJP and RSS stopped going after them and brought them in to find solutions, they would find that they have such an invaluable ally there in the Sikh community to help make the nation better and stronger. And I do believe that's going to be a major benefit when Khalistan happens. I think that there's going to be an opportunity there to really change the tides of the future of India, of Khalistan, and of the entire world. And, I just think it's such a shame that the BJP and Modi and others in that whole arena are just in such a wrong mindset. Instead of moving to the future, they are still living in the past, Angus.
Yeah, the whole concept of Khalistan, it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for India, although for some reason, they don't seem to see why it could be a win. And of course, it's a win for the Sikh community and of course the democratic world. It's a win for the West as well, etc. I say it defies logic why India just don't do that. But anyway, maybe it will happen sooner than we realise. Canada with a man. Thanks for explaining in English. Now, I wasn't quite sure if this comment was referring something specifically to anything that we touched on, James. But yeah, I mean, we exist. The English channel does exist, of course, to cater for our English-speaking, particularly the diaspora, but of course those in the Punjab who watch us, who want to, whose language have English as a second language, who want to improve their English. Hopefully, our English is not that bad, James, but hopefully we serve as an educational element. And I think we have had comments in the past where thank you for our channel because it is helping, particularly the young generation in learning their English. So yeah, James, we have to keep our English as I was going to say as good as we can or as well as we can.
Yeah, absolutely, Angus, and I think that it's also a benefit to non-Sikhs as well, who are getting curious with all of this information around Khalistan and the broader media coverage of it. They want to know more, they want to learn, and they want to understand the significance and importance of it. And of course, that's where we come in, because we also act as a bridge to the community, the non-Punjabi speaking community, to give them information and to give them the power of knowledge to stand up and stand arm to arm with our Sikh friends. And yeah, absolutely, I think this is an important one, and thank you for acknowledging that.
Indeed, and this does actually link on to another comment actually from KP Singh, who said, my request to all Sikhs, please educate people around you about how to use VPNs in order to consume the blocked content on social media. Yeah, again, and we say this regularly to our viewers in Punjab, yeah, you've got to get the word out there, get more people on VPNs. And just, we are investigating from our side, from the satellite side, about the whole VPN issue. Is there something that we can do from our side to look at the whole VPN issue? It's a case of watch this space. We are working behind the scenes to work out if there are ways that we can find tunnels through the Great Indian Firewall so that more people in the Punjab can watch us. But until that point, yeah, please do spread the word around the Punjab. Get people aware that we do exist. Unfortunately, yes, at the moment you still do need a VPN, but it's worth it, as I'm sure you and your colleagues and your friends in the area will find. And Jurarai mentions, James and Scott, our border of Khalistan should be more areas like all land was in the Sikh Raj. And this is followed also by Harbinder Sandhu, who says, Sikhs pushed back invaders across the Khyber Pass. We all know that. But what is the plan as to how far Sikhs will back the invaders from the east-south or southeast? That will determine the boundaries of the Sikh Raj. Well, yeah, this is, again, a huge topic. And it's all about, what are the boundaries of Khalistan? And I do quite often ask guests on the podcast and behind the scenes, and I ask Sikhs, what are the boundaries of Khalistan? I think it's one of those questions where there is no definitive answer. Because if we look back historically at the actual boundaries of the original Sikh Empire, it's ambiguous. It did actually, of course, change throughout the time of the empire. There was almost a rolling boundary. It grew and it shrunk to some degree. And in fact, I did find a very interesting YouTube video where a Korean, of all people, for some reason a Korean who was interested in this subject, put together a very clever time-lapse map across the years of the Sikh Empire of how that boundary grew and contracted over that period. But again, how accurate that is, who knows? And of course, it is very reliant on documented history at the time, some of which may be right, some of which may be wrong. And of course, there will be gaps in that history. But we do know, obviously, it covered much of the existing Punjab, obviously all of the existing Punjab. It did, in some circumstances, stretch down as far as Delhi. It did, in other circumstances, stretch up to the Khyber Pass in Afghanistan. And of course, it did stretch up into, on the northern side, towards Ladakh, etc., and south towards Maharashtra. It's very hard to define. It's very hard to say exactly what the boundaries were. But today, where should those boundaries be? I think there is a general consensus. Obviously, it should follow at the very least, today's Punjab. But of course, today's Punjab, or the Punjab partition was divided twice since 1947. So then again, it should, of course, go back to the old boundaries to include Ladakh, etc. Now, of course, we have the Punjab in Pakistan, and there are many, actually, commenters who argue it should be Punjab in Pakistan, and Lahore should be the capital. And there's been all sorts of heated debates about whether that should be the case, or Amritsar, etc. In reality, James, I think when Khalistan does come, it will be, at the time, it will be a round table of stakeholders who will sit down, and there will be very long, very intense debates and arguments. I have no doubt it will be very heated at the time. Where should that boundary be of Khalistan on day one? Should it include parts of Pakistan? Who knows? But ultimately, all I would say from an outsider's objective perspective, I suggest just get a Khalistan with a boundary on day one. Further extension of that can be argued in the future, but what matters is that a Khalistan of whatever boundary is established as soon as possible. We all know the benefits that will bring, but where those boundaries will be, yeah, look, time will reveal, James.
Absolutely, but just think about how exciting it'll be when we get to that point that they're actually recognizing Khalistan and talking about boundaries. I mean, that will be just an amazing point in history.
Yeah, indeed. And I myself, many years ago, back in the 1980s, in fact, ironically, it was the year after 1984, the dreadful attack on Amritsar. I was in the Punjab in Pakistan. I travelled around with a colleague, two of us, with a backpack, with the only white people that we saw for months. And we met several Sikhs at the time. And again, I didn't understand anything about Sikh at the time. But I do have very, very fond memories of that time in the Punjab. I was greeted with the most wonderful hospitality. I met so many Sikhs at the time who took us in and fed us. And the whole concept of Sikhi was very much alive and well. And we did try to cross that border to Amritsar at the time. But of course, after 1984, that border was very much closed. There was still a lot of tension in the region. And but yeah, as I say, I have very, very fond memories of my time in Pakistan's Punjab at that time. So, okay, let's move on, James, because oh dear, we're running out of time. And the final comment comes from Jagjit Singh. It is a very timely comment, and again, it's another one in Punjabi. And I did have to check with Google just to check I've got this right, but I think I have. And it's a very appropriate sign-off to the show. It, I believe, do correct me if I'm wrong, members of the audience, it is Khalistan Zindabad. Long live Khalistan, James.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one that we hear a lot of.
Indeed. And in fact, actually, I didn't really need Google Translate on that one. It does appear on a regular basis in our comments column. Absolutely, keep the Khalistan Zindabad coming. It's always very powerful and very encouraging to see. So Khalistan Zindabad indeed. Unfortunately, though, we must end the show today for Perspectives. Don't forget to keep those comments coming in. Always give us loads of really interesting information to check out. So do keep them coming in after our videos. Don't forget, of course, you can message us directly at message@satellitetv.com on any news items that you would like to highlight that you don't want to put in the public domain. But in the meantime, thank you so much as always for for watching Perspectives. It is a goodbye from me, and it is a goodbye from James.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.